If you're here, you already sense there's something out there, something magical and mysterious, just waiting for you to find. And you've probably already discovered it isn't as easy as just thinking happy thoughts. You're not alone. Generations of shamans, philosophers, seers, and scientists have pursued this eternal quest. Where their ideas come together, you'll find powerful tools to cultivate magic and self-mastery in your own life. Welcome to the Magic and Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Donna Woodwell. I'm a former journalist and author, a master astrologer, and a hermetic initiate, and it's my honor to be your guide. In each episode, I'll meet you at the crossroads of science and spirit, reason and intuition, to help you discover the wisdom that works for you. Are you ready? The adventure awaits. Hello and welcome back to the Magic and Mastery Podcast. This is episode 26, my magical conversations with Kathy Biehl. Yes, this is my Halloween special episode, and you are in for a real, dare I say, treat. My friend Kathy Biehl and I spend an hour talking about a life filled with magic and all of its implications. So, before we dive in, just don't forget that I've added some headings and timestamps to the show notes, as well as links to all the things referenced during this episode. And you can find the show notes at www.magicandmastery.com/podcast. And as always, don't forget to stay until the end when we give you a little bit of homework so you can try and make some magic in your own world. And now, let's get started. So welcome, Kathy. I am so glad you are joining me on my podcast today because truly you are one of my favorite humans. Kathy is that perfect combination of smart, sassy, and a little silly. And it's just delightful to be in her energy, all of the things that she knows. And that is voluminous, winning the trivia nights just because there's two of them who know everything.
AKA we're two Aquarians.
Wide range of knowledge from her first career in the law to her true love, astrology, or maybe theater, or maybe some of both, all mixed together into a font of information wrapped up in a beautiful and brilliant heart. So,
oh, thank you.
We are going to do something a little different than what Kathy usually does. Only a little different. Is Kathy's usually over on Om Times with her astrology podcast and all of the trainings that she does in astrology. But today we're going to talk even more directly about magic. The magic that it's in the world and all around us. And so, Kathy, thank you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm very happy.
I know. When I asked you to do this, you automatically yes, I will do that. And we were talking about great stories about magic and the rise of magic. I want to say the rise of magic since it seems to be a hot topic in the world. So we'll start super simple. And what does magic mean to you?
Magic is many things. It is seeing multi-layers of reality, being out in the world and seeing more than what is happening on the surface. Magic is a sense of awe and play and possibility. And magic is a way of focusing your thinking and your desires and working with all of these disparate layers of reality. So it requires us, it encourages a particular type of vision of being able to see when things are happening, being able to connect dots, and being able to see the playing out of the spells you've done, which sometimes happen in ways you don't quite anticipate.
So it's
how's that?
Living consciously on all levels.
Yep. And the dog says me too. So nature's part of it.
Nature's part of it. She's excited. So it's living consciously on all levels, which I think is just beautiful. So why do you think at this moment in time is a potent time for magic to be a hot topic?
Well, it certainly is surging into not just respectability, but faddishness. And it's a matter of fact way of life I am witnessing in a generation way below me, way younger than I am. Young mothers. So I would say women from their 20s on down to little girls. It seems to be a way of life. And I have stumbled onto communities of it. TikTok probably, Instagram probably, social media probably has fed into this a lot because it's really easy to dress up and play and act witchy. But I think it's actually connecting people into some real knowledge, some real information, and in real world communities are building out of it. And I think I told you over the phone, I've stumbled into a network of witchlings in northern New Jersey and just across the border into New York State. And I keep going to different events just to see them because they're crafting and they're making things of a high quality, not just, goofy little things, but beautifully made and made with intention and supporting each other and running around and dressing in a certain way. There's a community building aspect to it. So why do I think this is happening? Because the old rules of life have completely fallen apart.
I think there is a lot to be said for that. I mean, we are at a moment in time when things don't make sense. The old rules don't work anymore. Yep. And whenever you have to shed your skin and recreate a new reality, that's in essence what magic is. It's the art of shedding your skin and building a new reality. And so it comes up for many people at those moments in time when there's a lot of social transition, social movement, and fluidity to reinvent yourself. And add on to that, I think, an acceleration because, when you get locked up in a pandemic and alone a lot, I think your little psychic ears perk up, your little antennas perk up in a new kind of way, and people start feeling more around them. Whether you want to blame it on the psychology of inventing an imaginary friend to keep you company in the middle of a pandemic or something deeper than that you put the two of those things together, and I think that we are seeing a new explosion of something we haven't seen in a while.
There's another element to it also that I have observed, and it's intergenerational. I am observing mothers and their very young daughters in tandem and honoring the generations of women before them. And it's just amazing to me. I mean, it seems to me that an interest in magic is frequent in preteens, in young adolescent girls, and it does probably have to do with reinventing yourself, things feeling different and wanting to assume some form of power. And for that reason, there are a lot of people in there around the age of 40 who are utterly obsessed with the film Hocus Pocus, for example, because that modeled to them that this is a way of being. But I'm seeing this happening in the world, walking in the world. Now, maybe a couple of decades of really fantastical TV programming has something to do with this also. But I am witnessing adults and children together, and the adults talking to the children as intelligent, creative beings, not, oh, here, do this, and ordering them around. It's astonishing to me. And I've stumbled on some things lately where I've just looked at it and gone, I was born in the wrong decade. I have seen people, well, heaven forbid I would ever think that, but decades ahead. But I'm running into people who show no signs of ever having feared that someone was going to light a match to them. And I will tell you, growing up in the Southern Baptist High School in Dallas, Texas, I actually heard it said, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," in the cafeteria. When I was talking about a friend of mine, and someone wanted to run me for the Texas legislature, and I had this image of headline saying tarot reading lawyer and my lawn being set fire to. So no, I didn't do it. And I watched this spreading just naturally, like it's the coolest thing in the world. And again, there is a networking, community building aspect to it, particularly on Instagram, of different practitioners tagging others and collaborating on events and doing events together and having giveaways together and cross promoting. My jaw just goes slack at it.
It is this
Happily.
a very different, dare I say, Aquarian vibe when people are working together for a common purpose. I promised last week that I wouldn't give away spoilers for Lucifer, that just finished its programming on Netflix, but people have had a week to watch it now, so I figure it's totally fair. So at the end, last season, God has gone on vacation to an alternate dimension, and there's a new god in town, which ends up being a coalition of angels. So there's not one god. There is a small community of those who are answering people's prayers and guiding the way, but they make all of their decisions by a team. And I'm like, wow, talk about the rise of the Aquarian age, where there's no longer a singular point of view being in charge of everything, that there is only a multiplicity, and figuring out how to live with your own truth and allowing other people to have their own points of view as well. I mean, what a beautiful metaphor.
And I love the fact that these kinds of messages come through entertainment. Really, really important, because it's carrying the fine tradition of the Twilight Zone and Star Trek and a variety of other, Battlestar Galactica, second edition, a whole bunch of fantastical television shows that have laid the groundwork for a different way of viewing reality and community and humanity.
And that makes you one of the best people to speak to this, of the deep relationship between art and magic. So how would you explain the relationship between both of them?
Well, some people might say that art is magic, because, at least the visual arts, because, well, probably any of them, because you get an idea, you have an image, you have something you want to create, and you then explore it and see how you make it manifest in the physical world. Gee, huh.
Writers who are creating their own worlds, and the line between stage and theater and ritual is not as clear as some people might like to say it is.
Oh, no. Not at all.
So you have been doing this kind of work. I mean, even back in the days when you were the tarot card reading lawyer in Texas. How did you first start moving in the direction where your world opened up from, well, Dallas to, I live in Texas, so I can just say Dallas. I assume people understand what I mean. From Dallas to this vibrant world that you're in now. How did that start, and what were your biggest turning points along the way?
Oh, okay. Well, it starts way before Dallas. It starts in Pittsburgh. When I was, one of the very first TV shows I used to watch was on Saturday mornings, The Magic Land of Alakazam, with Mark Wilson, a Dallas born and bred magician, also from my alma mater, SMU. He then performed at the state fair. Once we moved to Texas, I got to see him in person. But so he had, I believe this stuff was all real because of watching this show. And there was a show on that was local to Pittsburgh, Ricky and Copper. Copper was the dog. Ricky was a beautiful woman. And every day, every episode had kids whose birthday was that day. And she would pull things out of a log, and each kid performed. And at the end of it, the kids lined up and then walked down the road to a castle. And I was so excited when I got to go there for my 4th birthday. That's when I made my TV debut singing I'm a Little Teapot. And at the end of it, we lined up and I was going to finally get to see what was in the castle. And it was a painted flat. That was my first real collision with reality, because in my world, it was real. So I very early on discovered there are gigantic walls that will slap you in the face with this stuff. So that was a huge one. When I was a preteen and a teenager, I got really, really interested in what was called the occult.
Bum, bum, bum.
I read every book I can get my hands on. And I read witchcraft. And I thought you could do all kinds of things with candles. And I would stare at a candle and try to get my boyfriend to phone me. It never worked. And it's when I also became acquainted with astrology through books. And my mother gave me a tarot deck, and then it went from there. Now, when I went to college and law school, I put all this aside. And when I was studying for the bar, turning point number 2, my intuition exploded like a pressure cooker, just spewing baked beans all over the kitchen walls, because my conscious mind, my rational mind was so preoccupied that my intuition just went, well, we're going to come out. Bam! And I started having precognitive dreams that played out within the week. And this was the only time in my life when this has ever happened. So at that point, I just went, okay, fine. So I started combining the two things. And when I left normal law practice, I enrolled in classes at the Houston Institute of Astrology, started going to classes at night. But even so, there were some people I was out with, and then most of reality I wasn't. Like, my metaphysical clients and friends knew I was a lawyer. Very few of my lawyer friends or lawyers or law clients knew I did this other stuff. And that has been probably in the last 10 to 15 years, which is odd. It's taken me a long time to integrate it. I realized early on what I do is I live on a bridge between rational mind and intuition. And I kind of float back and forth. When I was growing up, when I was studying German literature, I read a story by Thomas Mann about a guy who's like half artist, half rational, for want of a better word. And I saw myself that way because I was the child of a scientist and the child of an artist. But I've just expanded it to, so I have a bridge between the sun and the moon as the logo for my astrology site. And it seems to have just normalized. There are more and more attorneys who are open now about the fact that they are astrologers. Trust me, I was really keeping it on the down low because I did not trust what the state bar was going to do. And I know for people who are a lot younger, this is going to sound like insanity, but I had my reasons. There were reasons for being cloaked and careful, and not anymore. Well, I am in my neighborhood because I live with people I do not trust. So I am not out with them because I have no idea what they would do. I still have this lingering image of someone setting fire to my lawn. Yes, I've worked on it.
It's another reason we get along, because I refuse to pick. I like, you have to saw myself in half at this point to say you must only be rational or you must only be creative. I'm like, my brain works better when I'm both. And I think that's, again, another side of the times, the fluidity that has shown up in other areas of our lives, the gender fluidity, the racial fluidity, assuming race is a concept that actually exists, that there's a fluidity in being able to work between the worlds, so to speak, walk between the worlds. One side of us informs the other, and our brains actually work better when we sit on that bridge, that corpus callosum between the two of them. Brings us more powerful experiences. The social psychologist Jonathan Haidt said that when your different parts of your brain are actually aligned, that's what creates the sensation of peak experiences, because It's expansive just by its very nature when we line up all the parts of ourselves. So I think that there's a lot of power in that. That as people are given the tools to be both rational and creative, and both are allowed, that psychic experience are going to become even more common as we move through our days. And if psychic experiences are becoming more common, then, why would witchcraft and things along those lines that are spirit sciences, astrology, witchcraft, even alchemy, that since they're already integrating both of those things, if they're done at their full capacity, then it fulfills a need. It fulfills a hunger, a place to feel like you belong and aren't crazy. And whereas if you are just doing one or the other, you're going to feel like half of you is in the closet at all times.
Also, I think you're more effective when you blend. You're much more effective when you blend. It's certainly what I do with my forecasts. I mean, I go with the transits and the numbers and the degrees of how everything is working together, and then I just let, for one of them, I mean, I riff my podcasts. People complain they don't get them in writing, but I riff them. I just look at the transits and just start talking. And there's an intuitive piecing things together or seeing the big picture. Intuition helps you to see the big picture and not get stuck in the details and miss what the through line is of what's happening. Intuition also helps you read other people,
It's thinking fast and slow. It's thinking fast and slow, which is now like acceptable as something for people to talk about. The slow part of us, the deliberate part, the rational part, is when it's married to the fast part, which, yes, is the instinctual, but it's our intuitive side comes through that instinctual nature. And so when we honor both as part of our collective experience. So the question then becomes, how could you imagine a world where it's not just individuals who come to this realization? It's not just a few families in different parts of the world who start building community. Do we get to a tipping point eventually, or is there anything besides just, hey, kick back, get your glass of iced tea, and watch it unfold?
Well, interesting you say that. I do believe that what people are calling the reawakening of the divine feminine or the rise of the feminine is a factor in this. And I also, with what you're saying, I immediately think about Jupiter going into the sign of Pisces, which is the sign of magic, and Jupiter meeting with Neptune, the ruler of it, next year. So who knows? Maybe we'll just all have a collective delusion then. Who knows? Or that might not be too bad, but that could be a point where we, like a dividing line. Not that there's a line ever in anything with Pisces, but you know what I mean, like where the water shifts.
They could legalize all kinds of illicit substances all at once, and we could just blast off to some other realm.
Well, I see there might be a collective aspect to that, I guess is what I'm saying. There could be. But beyond that, I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I wrestle with this all the time. You walk down the beach and you see the starfish, and you can pick them up individually and throw them in, but there's still starfish on the beach that can be tossed into the ocean. And eventually maybe enough people are walking down the beach tossing starfish back in the ocean. I don't know. Is this little podcast just an attempt to provide an opportunity for anyone who's listening to encourage them to walk along the beach? I don't know.
Why not? I think that's wonderful. You'll have lots of company. You might be very surprised. And it's real fun. And the clothing's definitely more fun.
Well, yes, there's that. Although I have told people forever that I truly am an Ann Taylor shaman at heart. So I guess it depends on whether or not you like the watery, flowy nature of life, or you cling to your pleated pants. I have a lot of Virgo. I'm going to be clinging to my pleated. I didn't even want to wear soft pants all the time. We get a pandemic and I actually want to get dressed.
Well, no, that brings some structure and stability. I can see that. But I want to go back to the starfish for a second, because that ties into something that flitted through my head earlier in the conversation about how writing can be magic. Magic can also occur while you're writing. Madeleine L'Engle, who wrote a book called The Arm of the Starfish. I heard speak multiple times. I met her. My copy of The Young Unicorns is signed by her, telling me to be a unicorn. Yes, like I needed that. But Arm of the Starfish has a really interesting character named Jonah who shows up, and she explains, I believe his name is Jonah, starts with a J. She explains that she was writing her story along and she had it plotted out, and suddenly this young man was sitting in the room with her, and it was the character. He just appeared in the room and told her how he was going to fit into the story, and he became a major character. So there is magic showing up in the writing.
When you're weaving your worlds. I forgot that we both love Madeleine L'Engle. Do you know what? I wrote my college application essay on A Ring of Endless Light.
That's wonderful.
It's amazing the things that bind us together in our lives. You have met many people, all stripes, throughout the course of your life. And I know you've met other people who have worked professionally as psychics or are just super magical to begin with. So why don't you share a couple of your favorite magical, mind-bending stories that even make you go, wow. I mean, I know it's real, but wow.
Years and years ago, while I was still living in Houston, my parents used to come to Houston once a year for a dinner for a grant that my father had. And it was around my mother's birthday. And I thought, okay, I'll just give her present. So I go to Book Stop, which was in the Alabama Theater. It was this wonderful bookstore. And I just start walking through the aisles, like, what would she like? What would she like? What would she like? And I go through the women's section for some reason. And she'd been taking a dream course, which was kind of odd. And I stop and this book just kind of jumps at me. And I go, well, this looks interesting. So I give it to her. And she opens it and gives me a look of utter, oh my God, what are you? You've scared. What are you? Like, abject terror on her face, because the cover of the book was a limited edition lithograph by an artist she'd worked with, and she owned one of the prints. I had no idea. Like, oh, so I thought, well, okay, that one's pretty cool. Could not do that on purpose.
Do you find that the more you are open to magic and spirit, the more likely these kinds of events are to happen more frequently, or so frequently they just become part of yep, that's just the way it works?
Oh, well, the more you send your intuition signals that you're paying attention to it, the louder it will get. And the more you track these things, you've honed your vision. So you are much more aware of them. There are things that happen that are, hashtag there's no such thing as coincidence. I have a friend from college who has been tracking these with me for years, and we've recently realized we were idiots and should have been keeping a running list, because we'd have multiple volumes by this point. But and here's another one involving my family. My family is kind of unconsciously this way. My mother, again, took a bunch of high school kids from Richardson, Texas, on a trip to Europe, and they were in Florence. And she walked from the main plaza and walked down some windy streets where there were a bunch of little shops. She goes into a shop. She sees a music box that looks intriguing. She reaches for it. Another woman picks it up. She turns. It's her sister-in-law she hadn't seen for, I don't know, a decade. And her brother was standing right there. It's like we have homing devices. And I guess I'm giving testimony here that there's something in my bloodline. It's just I'm the one that openly admits it.
Well, I don't know. I like to think it's in everyone's bloodline. It's just so many people have the doors of perception slammed shut and barred just to make sure that they feel safe in their little spaces. Whereas if you just open them and accept the possibility that cosmic weirdness happens all the time, life gets a lot more interesting.
Much more interesting.
In the little ways and the big ways. So, I mean, my most recent little way was I'm always like watching some series, one episode a night. Sometimes it takes a long time. I finally caught up with The Mentalist. I don't know if you've ever watched it.
Yeah.
It was on for about 5 years ago, I think. Anyway, so the main character was using a combination of hypnosis and mental techniques like observation and cold readings and a little bit of NLP to basically help people solve crimes. One of the many TV shows where there's an odd couple of a detective and a something, fill in the blank. Anyway, so as the seasons go on, they ended up moving to Austin, Texas, which is, of course, where I live. And so I was like, wow, this is an interesting thing for me to be watching right now because, there's this guy using all of these techniques. I was trained in hypnosis. I always love to see how these things are presented on television. I wonder if I need to do more research in this area as I'm walking the dog. Well, I look down and on the ground, there is, I swear to God, a light blue teacup coffee mug shattered on the ground at my feet. And if you have been watching these episodes, the show, his favorite cup is a teacup. He drops it and his eventual wife-to-be glues it back together using those Zen recreation techniques. And I'm looking down, I'm like, there's a blue teacup on the ground. How, in the context of me just watching this show, can I have manifested this at my feet? And it
Telling you, go back to hypnosis.
it makes you really, truly wonder about those synchronistic connections between different parts of your life, how one thing can be tied to something else. And sometimes it can be so very literal. It's just jaw-dropping.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you had asked me a second ago about experiences that were weird even for me. And I think this is the biggest one I ever encountered. While I was still in Houston, a therapist had suggested to me that I journal to my inner child. I was trying to avoid surgery and I ended up having to have it. And I was stunned to see the journaling say, I want a pretty dolly. I went, this is odd. I didn't have pretty dollies when I was a kid. I had weird dolls. I went, okay. So I was not doing too well recovering from my surgery, and a friend drove me to a Toys R Us on a Saturday night and just walked with me up and down the aisles going, is that a pretty doll? Is that a pretty doll? I was like, no. I wanted something I could hold, and none of the dolls looked right. The next day on a Sunday, I decided I would run a very brief errand. No one expected me to be gone from my house because I was not in good physical shape. So I ran a very brief errand and I ran into the Galleria and ran into a toy store I'd never been in before. And I saw the most beautiful doll I'd ever seen in my entire life, but it was about this big. It was not a huggable doll. And I went, so I bought a tiny Madeline doll. I'm like, okay, this will do. And I got home and there's a gigantic black garbage bag on my doorstep. I open it up. I mean, it's got a huge box wrapped. In it is the big version of the little beautiful doll. Nobody claimed it. I couldn't get anyone to own up that they had done that. It is my doll. When the world gets too much, I hug that doll.
What a great story. That is the kind of story that makes me wonder how anyone could not want to live in a world filled with magic, because that's magic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even if someone knew I was looking for a doll, the fact that they honed in on exactly the doll I had seen was astonishing.
Just astonishing. So if someone came to you, a client, friend, and said, I would like that. Yes, I want that. How would you suggest that each one of us begin to create a life where those magical breakthrough events become commonplace?
First thing is to start acting on your hunches. As I said earlier, the more that you act on your intuition, the louder it's going to get. So little things like, I think I'll just turn down this street. So start with that. That's like training wheels. And then just start noticing how things that happen around you play out the words that have been coming out of your mouth. It gets bigger and better after that.
And that's recognizing that we are active participants in creating our own realities.
So those are two really easy steps. And of course, you can take intuition building classes. There are all kinds of ways of learning that, but it doesn't matter what modality you use. I don't think anything that causes you to start to look at things with more of a sense of wonder, actually, and then have fun with it. And notice who, like, you think of somebody and they phone you. I mean, just start noticing these things happen all the time. And yes, people do actually still phone. I have proof of that.
I phone.
Yes, you do.
I phone all the time.
I know. I'm thinking of there was a wonderful show a couple of years back called Community that had one character about whom it was said, she was born in the 80s. She uses the phone as a phone. Well, so do I. So, I mean, a text message. I was with someone yesterday who asked me about another person, and in the span of the afternoon, each of us got a communication from said other person who neither of us has heard from in forever. So, like, clearly we summoned him.
Their ears were burning.
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Of course, people could join your school, take courses there. That's one really fun way.
They could indeed. We have many opportunities of people. Not only is there a membership program of people exercising their intuition in different ways, but I have full 12-week courses to dive into working with spirits and reading tarot cards, and small little mini classes on how to keep your own book of shadows and work with the phases of the moon in your everyday life, all of which are designed to help people become bridge people. That's the best way to think about it. Open up your intuition while at the same time it is grounded to a pragmatic observer self that can use logic to navigate our world. So hopefully people get the best of both worlds.
And it's actually extremely practical to develop these skills, because then you know that, you're walking down a street, you get a funny feeling, you pay attention to the funny feeling, and you go a different route. You don't have to ever understand why.
Sure. The crazy, weird sensations, that's all kind of fun. Being able to like control your dreams and fly around, that's also kind of fun. But honestly, I'm a Virgo, so I like planning my business around, all the woo-woo moments. Robin's on the show sometimes. she's my assistant in running magic school. And we, every week, practically joke about the teleprompter that I know my shamanic teacher used to wish for the days when she could have thoughts in her head and they just project out into the world so that other people could see what she was saying, so she didn't have to worry about finding the words. Yeah, Robin and I do that all the time. It's like, oh yeah, this, oh yeah, that, and oh yeah, this. And from other people, they would think that we sounded totally like lunatics. But it's convenient to be able to share information on all levels simultaneously, because you do get to more robust creative products, you get to more robust creations, and it saves a heck of a lot of time. And Virgos like being efficient, so I'm up with the efficiency of the Psychic Friends Network.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you have a burning sense that you want to share with the world?
One thing that comes to mind is the inadvisability of attempting to impose your will on situations or other people.
That's the challenge of our time, though, is recognizing that everyone has their own reality bubble. And you can't really take someone's reality bubble away from them. And yelling at them or trying to use reason to convince them that their reality bubble is wrong, you're not going to get very far.
Well, but also I'm cautioning people about using magic to determine outcomes or to force someone into doing something. I had a business partner that I started having all kinds of problems with, and I found out that she was like talking to me in the other realms and trying to push me into doing stuff. And I was reacting to it like, no, this is not how you run a business. No, this didn't last.
Well, no, because you can't. That's not respecting other people's realities.
Exactly. Yeah, and being too outcome fixated or too much having your own personal expectations being the guiding force for everything. There is a big element here of just having to let go and let things happen. And one arena that this is particularly strong in, and anyone who does readings deals with this all the time, which is the relationship arena. People get expectations of this needs to happen. And then when the other person doesn't do what you have decided they need to do, then you're irritated at them. And if you attempt magic to force that person to do what you want, that's an energy. There are two things. One, you will push them away. And two, the blowback on you is not something you want. There's a rule, like 3 times, whatever. I was in a circle in Houston that had somebody who was really mad at her supervisor, and she wanted to burn her supervisor's photo. And we all went, no, you'll get sunburn or worse. No, don't do that. So there's, what you send out is what comes back. So if you're sending out really, really controlling thoughts about people, I really caution people against that. I would say calling upon someone's soul or higher self to act with integrity, binding them, getting their soul to agree they're going to stop doing something, or spells for revealing the truth, but trying to control someone's behavior, it will blow back on you so badly. And just think of what you would do if you found out your business partner was going into the other realms during the night and trying to tell you what to do. It would not bode well for things. So don't do it. I don't usually say things categorically, but I'm saying it.
I'm a big believer in making people sit down and play the game what if, for whatever intention that they have in the world. And what if this manifests exactly the way, what's the range of possibilities? Because I want to lose weight can bring about a successful diet to getting really ill and losing a ton of weight, and a bunch of things in between, some of which may not be exactly what you intended, even though they fulfilled the request. And
I have a testimony to that. I was asking for more money and my house got broken into and my belongings were they became insurance proceeds.
I was asking for a new car and somebody jumped the curb and totaled both of our cars in our driveway.
Boy.
New cars came, but not exactly the way I had it in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And even though you can't control all of those things, you can at least be a little more specific in what you're asking for. And especially in the case of relationships, I want to meet the my perfect and ideal mate. And then they show up on your doorstep and you're like, oh, well, I wasn't ready for this. And now someone else has shown up. And so you have the whole thing that you set in motion, and you aren't willing to be responsible. What's that Saint-Exupéry saying? You are responsible forever for what you have tamed. And I think about that
Yes.
when you're doing magic, that you are responsible forever for whatever you are creating. And to keep that in mind when you are doing your conjurations and your wish fulfillment, that it's not all about the personal gratification. That's not the point. The point is to learn more about who you are and how you're living and who you are as a creative being, because that's a reflection of your divine self, and not about making your ego happy.
Because your ego won't be happy. Because it'll find some reason to be unhappy, and then it'll just keep wanting. Why not just enjoy the wonder of weird ass coincidences happening that make you go, really? This? Okay. Like one friend of mine has the symbol of roses for her mother, who watches over her. And one day she just got this wild urge. I think I'm going to go this way. And she saw a store and went, I think I'm going to this store. And the whole store was flooded with displays of roses.
Aww.
She went, oh, hi, Mom. Wouldn't you? Isn't it more fun to be surprised and delighted
If you're
than, well, okay, checking this off my list. I made this person do this.
would we all be able to remember the wonder that surrounds us? I think especially now, so easy to get caught up in the constant embroiling of stress-producing argumentativeness that seems to be on TV and the news and anywhere you look. That a break now and again, maybe often, and in order to give yourself some space to imagine a new way.
Mm-hmm. Kind, compassionate, fun.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Dressed like little fairies and run around. I witnessed this and it was astonishing. I went to a tiny Renaissance festival, not like the huge thing that's in Texas, not like the huge one in New York State, tiny. And there was a fairy quest for the kids, and the fairies talked to them and commissioned them to solve this big problem for them. And they had to figure out where they needed to go. There were clues. And when they got to a location, they interacted with adults, and the adults weren't talking to the adults. The adults were talking to the kids. And each little place had a quest, a little thing to do. And when you got done, the fairies talked about your hero energy and made them do one more special thing, and then sent the kid off to the fairy godmother to make a wish. And this woman was ingenious because she gave some ground rules for your wish. And one of them was that you had to sleep through, you just stay in bed all night. And that you could get up for a bathroom emergency, but you had to sleep. There was a special place to put your stone at night so that goblins didn't get it. And my friend, whose kid we were watching do all this, actually tracked down the fairy godmother to thank her because his daughter had stayed in bed for 4 consecutive nights because she believed in the wishes. And the fairy godmother also told her to write down her wishes and how they came true and bring them back next year to talk to her. So she was getting Magic 101, and also you have power. That was the message of this event everywhere you went. And there we go. That's it in a nutshell. So what is it going to mean 20 years from now, 25 years from now, when there's a community of little kids who've been brought up this way, who are now stepping into their roles out in the world, it's going to be real different than what we're watching now.
And what a wonderful message to recognize. You have power. You can create new realities, given that our reality is going to be created dramatically shifting over the next 20 years or something. Whether you blame it on climate change or if you blame it on technology change or all the other things that we're going through collectively, the world is going to be a different place 20 years from now, guaranteed. We need people who can think that way. We need people who can think outside the box and come to it with a design philosophy that reality has been created the way it is because we've been taking these steps. So let's change the steps and create something new.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hopefully, after you've listened to me and Kathy talk for a little while, you feel a little more hope. What do you think?
I'm incredibly optimistic with what I'm seeing. Very, very much so.
Okay. Well,
come along and play with us, people.
Come play.
It's a much more fun way to live. And it works.
Speaking of come playing, Kathy, why don't you share how people can find you to come and play?
My site is empowermentunlimited.net. I'm on YouTube at the Professional Aquarian channel. And I have a radio show on Times on the 1st and 3rd Mondays of every month at 5 o'clock. It's called 5 o'clock Eastern. It's called Celestial Compass, and it's about all kinds of different navigational tools. And I have very interesting people as my guests.
That she does. So I highly recommend you show up on Kathy's doorstep because you never know what you might find there. There might be all kinds of interesting gifts that people have left on her doorstep that might have relevance to you and your life. In fact, I would go so far as to say you will definitely find some amazing things and some amazing friends along the way. Well, Kathy, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with me on my little podcast. It has been my pleasure talking to you.
And mine talking to you.
All right. And I'm sure Kathy will be back, I promise, with more interesting conversations as we continue this journey on my Magic and Mastery podcast.
Now, wasn't that fun? I always enjoy spending time talking with Kathy about the possibilities of life. In fact, that leads me to a wonderful experiment. It's our imagination that unlocks our creativity, and our creativity that unlocks the joy that we feel every day. So for this week's experiment, I highly recommend you spend just a few minutes. Set a timer and give yourself just 2 minutes to sit down, close your eyes, and imagine the most amazing possibility you can think of. In fact, don't even think too hard. Just imagine yourself as a superhero or a fairy or a witch or a wizard or anything else that just gives you a sense of amazement and wonder at the possibilities of the world. And even more importantly, that might let you feel a little like a kid again. And give yourself those sacred couple minutes to imagine, to daydream. And when your alarm goes off and you come back, check in with yourself to see if you don't feel like the world is just a little more magical. And let me know what you find, because I'm willing to bet the answer is not only yes, but oh heck yes. Now, if you want to hear more of my conversations with Kathy, then I highly recommend that you attend our Magic and Mastery annual event where we dive into the year ahead and learn how you can make it filled with all of the magical creativity you could possibly want. So I've teamed up with Kathy. We're going to be giving our forecast. We're going to be available for questions and answers, and we're going to be suggesting some spells and rituals that you can use to tap into the interesting energies that are coming up in 2022. So please surf on over to www.magicandmastery.com/2022- forecast or find the link in the show notes. That's www.magicandmastery.com/2022-forecast. You won't regret signing up for this live event that also includes a 360-page workbook to make next year filled with all of the things that you desire. And with that, the time has come to end yet another episode of the Magic and Mastery podcast. But before you go, don't forget to check out those show notes at www.magicandmastery.com/podcast, because I have included links to our annual forecast event, as well as other timestamps and things that we talked about in this episode, just to make it easy to find exactly what you're looking for. And so, thanks to tuning in to this episode of Magic and Mastery. And of course, I love getting feedback because it helps me figure out what makes you jazz, so I can provide more of the stuff that you're looking for. So it would help mean so much to me if you take a moment to rate and review the podcast. And if you like it, why don't you share it with a friend?